ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة. نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح. ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة. ونحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us from wherever you are in the world. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that this event is held primarily in Borlu on sovereign Wajak Noongar Boja. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and to First Nations people across the continent of so-called Australia. Gedamna Sabah Cultural Forum, as a group of settler refugees, extends our solidarity to First Nations people across this continent and across the world, and acknowledges that the systems which allow us relative safety here in so-called Australia are the same ones which create oppression and dispossession in this settler colony. We recognize that sovereignty was never ceded. This is and always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Gedamna Sabah Cultural Forum is concerned with creative and cultural work and the edification of its intersections with civil political resistance. This forum is committed to human rights issues and the effective role of the arts in political and social change. This event we're holding today, during International Human Rights Day, is to raise awareness of the situation in Sudan and to practice active and radical solidarity. Today, you'll hear from poets across the world as they share their poems for Sudan. But Sudan is not the only place that's facing atrocities. So we would like to acknowledge all of the genocides, seen and unseen, everything that our siblings are experiencing across the world, whether it's in Chad or Palestine, and we would like to pay our respects and extend our solidarity. Today, you'll be hearing from fabulous poets and artists from around the world. And so our next guest is joining us from Gallagherland in Sydney. Dr. Michelle Hamadache is a Sydney writer of short stories and essays. She has publications in Australia, the UK, and in the US in many journals. She's currently the Director of Creative Writing at Macquarie University. Her writing and research explore representations of Algeria in English, which sounds so cool, by the way. Thank you so much for joining us.
Look, thank you so much. And I am going to start by saying that it's such an honour to be here among poets, and being mostly a teacher, I did the only thing I knew how, which was to write a letter to a thief. Dear thief, thank you for the Blue Nile River. Thank you for my invitation to be among poets. Thank you for my invitation to be a poet for tonight. Dear Afif, thank you for the Blue Nile River and a town on its banks, for feet cooled with its silt. Thank you for writing poems from prison. Thank you for reminding me that poems matter to the people of Sudan, to people. Dear Afif, thank you for sending me poems and books of poems. Thank you for reminding me that poems contain sesame oil, yellow-eyed skeletons, grandmothers, blindfolds, teardrops, candlesticks, bruises, heat, sunrise, and rain. That poems say no. Poems say yes. Dear Afif, thank you for the river of the Blue Nile, for words that make bridges that span 1,000 years, 1,000 miles, for words that make bridges between Yisr and bridge, between enter and me. Dear Afif, thank you for writing poems to remember Mahmoud Muhammad Taha, the people whose names are scratched into walls of the ghost houses, to remember the people who burn in streets from Khartoum to Darfur, to remember streets made for walking, perhaps hand in hand as lovers or children or curious onlookers, made for people rushing to work or rushing back home to grow old and wise and content or cranky, but to grow old with no memories of rape or torture or murder, to grow old with children and grandchildren listening to stories dictated by moons to yawning stars, with no mentions of generals or of Kalashnikovs, only wind and the waves of the Blue Nile River. Dear Afif, thank you for being the crucible stronger than the mixture of injustice, wanton violence, and oppression you've melted down to make words into bridges over rivers between chasms. Thank you for it, dear Afif.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was gorgeous. And thank you so much for joining us tonight as a poet, and for sharing that wonderful work with all of us. And I'm sure that Afif, if he was on screen right now, would be grinning quite a lot.
ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ونحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح.